well, because we started small and we didn't start with a community cafe initially. But I guess because we started getting in touch with more asylum seekers in the local community, we started to get to know the needs. And I guess thinking about it, I came up with about maybe 5 principles or thoughts or guidelines that we've used to shape this project. And the first one is work with, not just for. We want to work with our guests. We want to work with our asylum seekers. They know what they need. They're people just like you and me. They have skills, experience, knowledge that we don't have. So everything we're doing we're trying to involve them. I guess one of the first, the whole community cafe is actually came from one of our guests saying we need a place to meet. We need a place to meet local people, to practice our English conversationally. And so this is how we started coming up with the community cafe, which as Claire has explained, is just a night where we get together, talk, have food, play some games, get some other practical support. And I guess the second one is we're coming here to serve and learn from the people that we get to meet and share our lives with. It's not just for us to show and tell. I think we're trying to keep a humble attitude towards, again, there are people that are like you and me, have had the unfortunate circumstances of growing up or being born in a country where life might not be as stable, where they may be persecuted for their faith, for their sexuality, for their social group they're part of. And we can learn. I believe we can learn a lot from them. We can learn, do life with them. And another thing is the differences that there are. We've got many cultures, from people from El Salvador to Iran to Sudan to Eritrea, to Russia to Botswana. So a lot of different cultures, a lot of different ways of doing things and doing life. And I think that makes a really rich experience for us to be part of and learn from each other. So I think that's and respecting those differences and understanding those differences, I think is what for us as volunteers has been very beneficial, but I think also for our guests, that they know that the UK and London is a multicultural society with lots of different cultures, religions, groups, and we respect that and understand that. And as Claire said, training and safeguarding are important. Let's do it. Let's do what we do well. So we train and provide safeguarding for our volunteers and for the project. And I guess lastly, have fun. If it wasn't fun, people wouldn't come. And if I think it's boring, they'll probably think it's boring too. So that's why we have some games, that's why we have some food, that's why we have sometimes we have a party or a picnic, and then go to the beach and just enjoy and just do life together. I think that's what it's about. But very briefly, some of our, I guess, guiding principles. But I think it would be good, Ella, if we can go into a breakout group. And I don't know, there's 17 people, so maybe about 5 people per group, and maybe discuss in your breakout groups for 5 minutes. What are some of the challenges or issues? But I'd actually like to add something, which and maybe also some opportunities that might come up in working with refugees and asylum seekers. Maybe a good idea to get some feedback from one of each groups, to share some of the topics or challenges or opportunities that you recognize.
Do it quickly. I think one of the things that we just shared was just some of the challenges, which was not being able to meet the needs. So having more needs than resources, and then how we prioritize how we meet needs. And I think one of the things that we said was we look at always, moms and babies always first. So if we do have someone who's a baby or a mom that needs support, we would do that first. We would meet that need first and then move on to the next. But also the other thing that we do is we've created partnerships with other organizations that do something that meet a need. So things like I work for Refugee Education UK. So we're able to refer young people who need support with education to the organization I work with. We partner up with charities such as Little Village to refer moms and babies for support for clothing or support for maternity. And we also use resources that we have within our own church community. So like we have medics in our church community through Greenlight. So we can pull on that to be able to ask questions about things like initial health assessments or just support understanding the GP and health system. But also creating resources that enable other volunteers and empowers volunteers to be able to meet needs, to be able to answer questions, and to be able to signpost to local communities and organizations as well.
Yeah, we covered much of the same bases. We just talked about what our backgrounds were. So one of us hadn't worked with refugees before, and the other two had. And what we found that we were comparing notes on things like language difficulties, say, which often is the first barrier, and learning English as a second language, trying to work with other key organizations and stakeholders in the community, how best to approach that, including local government as well, because the local government, especially in the UK, are quite overwhelmed and they don't have resources even to take care of actual native citizens who are also waiting for housing and many other things. And then in the middle of that, when refugees come in the middle of it, it can be quite tense and it can be quite sensitive. And also very disheartening for the refugees. So that we shared a lot on. I think that's pretty much all the time that we had. Yeah.
So there were two big points we raised in our group. The first one was there are potential issues with communication. Whilst it's quite easy to put something into Google Translate, so I'm sure we've all found that very helpful in the past. Trying to talk with someone who does not necessarily have high English proficiency, it's a different matter of knowing whether or not what you're about to translate might be offensive to someone in a certain context. And that can be very difficult if you're not familiar with the cultures of other people and can be a bit of a barrier to engagement. So some sensitivity might be required there. Mm-hmm. The second thing, I think we've given a lot of really good examples as to why this was important, is that you can't assume that the experiences of different refugees, even if they come from perhaps the same country, are going to be the same, or that they're necessarily going to get on with each other just because you brought them to one social occasion. An example could be, so you've got two refugees from one country, but one's from a rural, poor background and one's from a sort of upper middle class urban background. There's no guarantee that they're going to get on. There might actually be class or cultural differences within that could cause you difficulty. Similarly, there can be issues where, so I know one's come from the work of Humanists UK has been people who have fled their home countries because of risk of religious persecution for their beliefs or lack thereof, to get to this country, and they're expected to socialise with people from their own country who may continue oppressing them because of that difference in belief. And so that's something else you would need to be live and sensitive to, recognising just because you want a group of people to get on with each other and they might share a superficially similar background doesn't mean they will. And it requires a great deal of cultural sensitivity and I think important setting expectations and managing expectations too before you do anything so that people can feel comfortable and they know what's expected of them would be very important.
And we've definitely seen that in our work with the community cafe as well. Let me just show you that the ones that I was thinking of initially. Of course, there's often some sort of trauma or potentially mental health issues through what they've gone through, the experience that they're having, either in their country of origin, the journey on the way, and or even the arrival in the UK, because once they're in the UK, there's still challenges to overcome, and often maybe unexpected challenges where they initially think that everything might have been sorted once they get to the UK, but it's definitely not the case. For many of them, there's no very limited autonomy or no autonomy. Sometimes, especially for those seeking asylum, they arrive to the UK. They are putting somewhere in the country, in a place that they have no choice over. Sometimes with a person that they don't know in the same room or same house that they don't know. They especially if they're in initial accommodation, they have no choice over their food. They can't necessarily travel or go anywhere or do anything that costs money, because financially they're very limited. They have no right to work or education initially for education. For the first 6 months for adults, they don't have a right to education, or they have to be in the UK for at least 6 months before they can start accessing education. But then it might be in the middle of the school year, so they might have to wait till September or January. So that often can be a long period of not being able to do anything to, I guess, develop yourself. Cultural challenges, including languages, as has been mentioned. Legal issues. One of the issues we're seeing a lot at the moment is that whilst it's not mandatory necessary to have a lawyer, the recommendation is to have like a lawyer or solicitor to help you with your case. Now, an asylum seeker can get a lawyer or solicitor through legal aid, but especially in the London area, we cannot find any solicitors willing to take cases because, one, they have a big caseload already, and second, legal aid is, it's not a lot for a solicitor to take on a case, so they're not very keen to take it on. So legal issues or legal challenges are there. Social services, especially younger people under 18, they'll be in care of social services. So again, it might be a local authority that makes decisions for them. We've had a lot of cases in the last 2 years where young refugees who claim to be 16, 17-year-olds, but then the Home Office or the local authority say, no, we don't believe you, you are 25 or 30, meaning the support, because a young refugee under 18 will have immediate access to education, foster family, or semi-independent living. But if they get an age assessment where a social worker or a border force employee decides that they are over 18, then the support changes. So it might have meant that they've been 9 months in a foster family, but then had a negative age assessment, or there's an age assessment that says you're 25. That means they're going to go to like an adult hotel. Again, that can be challenged, but there's a lot of challenges there. I've had young guys on the phone, desperate and not wanting to go into the hotel room because they have to share it with an adult person, and so it's horrifying for them. Fortunately, we were able to get him out by appealing the age assessment, and now he's back into care, which is good. And of course, there's a risk of isolation, human trafficking, and exploitation. I don't know. There was earlier this year, I think, a hotel in Brighton. There's 200 young people that were disappeared or being groomed, or again, they're very vulnerable. They could be taken by a drug trafficking ring or county lines. So there's a lot of vulnerabilities for these asylum seekers and refugees coming into the UK, which we have to be aware of when we're working with them. Again, like Claysley mentioned, we're and Niwa as well, we're trying to empower our volunteers and our team to help signpost or have fact sheets on different areas so people can get the right support Just on, you might have seen this before. It's sort of like the phases that you can go through when arriving to a new culture or a new country. I feel like it's a bit more extreme for a refugee or asylum seeker. They might be initially very happy coming to a country, thinking they're safe, they've made it, they can start rebuilding their lives. So they might be in a high level of happiness and in a honeymoon phase. But then maybe the culture shock or the difficulty or the challenges of living in the UK might face them, which can put them down again, like in a low level of happiness and even depression or mental health issues. And then there might be an adjustment phase, which I think normally it will take a long time, depending on each person individually or the situation. That will get them to another level of happiness. But again, this is something to keep in mind in working with refugees and asylum seekers, that they might go through these phases. For our volunteers and our team, we have some boundaries in terms of like what we do and don't do, and which is part of our training, as Clay mentions. So we're all about like building relationships, asking permission or consent when taking photos or asking questions, help them to dream and plan their futures, communicate positively and report any concerns. We don't want to delve too deep into their personal stories. We don't really want to ask about their journeys. We don't want to tell that they look older than they are. They can all be triggers for traumatic events, which Neil will talk about in a bit, so I won't go too far. And so we have some strict boundaries on what we can and cannot do, just not to trigger any trauma, but also to protect ourselves and to protect our volunteers and making sure that everybody's staying safe.